So welcome to the virtual talk for Geometric Aljamia, a cultural transliteration. This exhibition is currently on view at the Robert C. Williams Museum of Papermaking, that's located in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's on view from September, or has been on view since September 5th and ends on December 6th. So if you're in the Atlanta area and are able to, please come by and see it in person. This is just one of many programs related to this exhibition. We had the artist talk with several of the artists featured in the show earlier, and that can be found on the Paper Museum's website. The Paper Museum is dedicated to collecting, preserving, increasing, and disseminating knowledge about papermaking, past, present, and future. And we provide programming from ages 5 to adult and have both permanent and changing exhibitions. We're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and it's free and open to the public. If you're not in the Atlanta area, you can access our programs and many resources on our website at paper.gatech.edu or via the many social media outlets that are listed here on the website: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. So tonight we'll hear from Dr. Natalie Khazaal, Director of the Arabic, Middle East, and North African Programs in the School of Modern Language, Dr. Mohammad Ghomi, Professor in the School of Mathematics, and Professor Ahmed Ahmed, Lecturer of Arabic in the School of Modern Language. We'll hear from all three of these presenters, and then after the presentations, the floor will be open for questions. So please be sure to submit your questions to the Q&A button and try and reserve the chat for making observations or comments or sharing resources. It just makes it easier when you use the Q&A button, easier for us to find the questions at the end of the presentations. And you can submit your questions to the Q&A at any point during the presentation, but we'll address them after all three of our presenters have spoken. So I'm going to share some of their bio, and then the first person to speak after the bios will be Dr. Khazaal. So Dr. Natalie Khazaal is Associate Professor in the School of Modern Languages, the Georgia Institute of Technology, and the Director of the Arabic and Middle Eastern and North Africa programs here. She studies minorities and the media, and she's also an American Council of Learned Societies Fellow for her work on Arab atheists. Her latest books, Pretty Liar and Like an Animal, study the relation between media, the different forms of disenfranchisement, and the different forms of disenfranchisement. She is currently working on a volume about non-religion in the Islamic world. Dr. Mohammad Ghomi is a professor in the School of Mathematics at Georgia Tech, specializing in geometry. He obtained his PhD from the Johns Hopkins University in 1998 and held positions at UC Santa Cruz, University of South Carolina, and Penn State University before moving to Georgia Tech in 2005. Professor Ghomi's research has been consistently supported by grants from National Science Foundation, including a Career Award, and he has received a Simons Fellowship. Professor Ahmed Ahmed is a lecturer of Arabic. He has a master's degree in applied linguistics from Georgia State University. In 2013, he was a Fulbright Scholar at GSU. He is currently working on his doctoral program in language and literacy at Georgia State University. He believes that a language classroom is the place where students should learn not only the target language, but also the culture of the language. It is the place where students should get a better understanding and authentic exposure of the target culture. He is interested in intercultural communication, biolinguism, transnationalism, and teaching Arabic as a foreign heritage language. He enjoys practicing Arabic calligraphy. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and the next person you'll hear from is Dr. Natalie Khazaal.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here, and thank you everybody for attending this virtual event. I will be discussing if Islamic art is applied geometry and show you some examples of Islamic art, and just talk in general about Islamic art and how we can think about it, especially through the prism of geometry and things that are related to that. So since I'm first to start, I might as well start with giving you some kind of an understanding and an idea about what we're talking in terms of geographical location and in terms of historical location, and then in terms of what is the actual meaning of Islamic art. So we are covering an area that is from Europe all the way to China, and we are covering a period that starts in the 7th century all the way to today, with different empires that have been larger and smaller at different times, and they have, I guess, incorporated many different ethnicities and many different religions as well. It is not just Islam. So I'll be talking about all of these times. So Islamic art is, of course, art before everything else, but it is something that we see today. Even though it started in the 7th century, we still see examples of it today. And I will talk about all of these points throughout this presentation. It is also art that we find in all the lands that were ruled by Muslim governments and rulers, but not necessarily lands that have all Muslim populations. This means that this art is not just art created by and for Muslims, but also art created by non-Muslims and maybe even for non-Muslims, as long as it is in that big geographical area that was ruled by the Muslim rulers. And the last point is that it is art that is both religious and a lot of it is secular art. We don't Islamic art is something very special. It's a special category. We don't talk about Christian art or Buddhist art. When we talk about art outside of the Islamic world, we usually talk about, for example, the medieval art in Europe, or we talk about Indian art or Japanese art, or we talk about Byzantine art. With the category of Islamic art, we have different guesses why we have this one category. Partially, it may be because in the 19th, 18th, and 19th century, when we started noticing these things, we were thinking about these bigger territories in a more essentialized way. And another reason might be because there is so much similarity between the different areas and countries and regions that cover Islamic art, primarily because one of the pillars of Islam is pilgrimage to Mecca. And when these artists were going on pilgrimages, they shared instantly for their time many new approaches, many new objects of art, and many materials. And so we see on a larger scale, we see a lot of similarities. Also, different Islamic artists were traveling from one area to another and encountering similar cultural expectations and ideas, and they were able to produce similar objects. We have one Moroccan, well, traveler born in contemporary Morocco back in, centuries ago, who traveled all the way to India, and he was able to be employed as a judge in India because the culture, there was a big shared culture. So first of all, I want to emphasize that Islamic art is not dead art. It is art that is alive even today. And you can see here examples of that on the, I guess, on your screen. It would be on the left side of your screen. You see a lunch box that was from Egypt made in the early 16th century. And we see all the ornaments. It's a box that actually has 3 different boxes, and in each box you can put a different type of food, and there is a cover on top, and then they're secured on the sides. They're locked in place, and you can just carry this around. And I remember my grandma had a bunch of those, and she was like carrying food around, and if she wanted to bring us something that she cooked, she would bring it in that kind of lunchbox. And you can actually buy those today on Etsy. If you see in the middle of the screen, you can buy it for cheap, or you can even buy a lunchbox also with Islamic arabesques with these ornaments on Amazon. Islamic art is still alive because it's part of so many other different designs that are contemporary, but they have been inspired and greatly influenced by all the centuries of Islamic art, especially of these geometrical designs. And here you could see actually my house. On the very top in the small picture, you can see me stenciling my floor with this geometric design. And underneath, you could see the floor after I stenciled it. And on the left, this is the bathroom where I stenciled it with a different type of geometric design, which is not sold as Islamic stencils, but it is very much inspired by that tradition of geometrical designs. So Islamic art is not just art that is made by Muslims, and it does not just portray Muslim objects or ideas or words. So you can see on the left side of the screen a frieze, which is kind of at the top of the wall. They would put these, I guess, writings, and that's called a frieze, in marble from the 10th century, saying that God is neither born nor gives birth to any children. But on the right side, you can see a Christian art from the Islamic period, which portrays actually Jesus Christ. And behind the figure, behind the head, you can see partially a cross. And in one of the hands, you can see the Greek letters Omega. And I think Alpha is the other one. So many different ethnicities in many different areas in the big Islamic empires were creating art for each other and for themselves. One of the big features of Islamic art is this it was striving for perfection. And all the designs of the arabesques, which are kind of models that are symmetrical and you repeat them, they really strive for perfection. Also on the left, you could see this marble panel with different designs also made in such a way that is very symmetrical. But there is oftentimes kind of anecdotes that the artists who do the arabesques or who would do these panels or who would do any other kind of art, they really wanted to leave a little bit, one of these elements, just to leave it a little bit off, because they were thinking that since I did it and it's not done by a supernatural God, then it cannot be 100% perfect. So I'd better leave just little trace of imperfection there, just to signal that what is perfect is beyond the human achievement and what humans can do. So pattern versus image. Oftentimes we hear that Islam forbids any images. And that's why we don't have any images in Islam. That's actually not true. It is true that religious art, for the most part, tries to avoid images, and instead we see patterns, geometrical patterns, and we see like other patterns. But most of Islamic art that we currently have in museums is actually art that is produced for a secular audience, for non-religious purposes. And you could see in this particular Ural Basin, you could see how many different figures, human figures there are produced in Iran in 19th century. So the consumption of this art really, unlike Europe and European art, when we expect to go to the museum to see some art, we expect the majority of it would be filled with paintings and maybe some sculptures. If you go to a Museum of Islamic Art, you are not going to see most of it in paintings and sculptures. You will see such variety of different objects and variety of different techniques and variety of different materials that they would use, from metals to wood to ceramic to fabric to paper to papyrus, any sorts of, to stucco, to gems and many other materials. And a lot of these objects were actually made for everyday use, for everyday purpose, like you see here, for washing hands and whatnot. Here, I can even challenge the religious part of the art, saying that you can never portray any figures, especially in a religious context. But if you see here, not only do we have a multiple variety of different figures, we have at the bottom the 3 rabbits that share different ears that were done in 3 different colors without any spillage, because the red color of one of the rabbits, typically when they paint with red, it usually kind of leaked and spilled, and in this particular example we don't have that. And on top, on the left, you could see these dishes, or they were part of like jars with designs that were carved as a whole, with holes. You see different images of different animals again, and they were used to purify water. But the bottom, at the middle and the bottom left image, these were both images of Muhammad, the prophet. And we know that there was, kind of like a prohibition against portraying, especially the prophet in an image and with his face. But that's not quite the case. We have multiple images of the prophet. So again, one culture, multiple different variations within that culture, very rich approaches to how we understand the world and the objects around it that we encounter through the perspective of Islamic art. For the most part, Islamic art is art that is practical. We do have art for art's sake, but the majority is used for practical purposes. Like you see here, this is on the floor of a kind of a mosque. We see collecting rainwater through this marble pattern that seeps down through a big basin of water, which is purified because of these different patterns. They are very practical purpose. And on the left, maybe this is art for art's sake. It is in a small kind of a secular bathroom in Qusayr Amra in Jordan, and you see multiple paintings with sensual character, with people bathing, with semi-nude figures. This is probably the closest of art we imagine as European art or art coming from the West. Here is another example of art, again, for practical purposes. This is the nilometer in Cairo from the 9th century. There were different varieties of these nilometers even before that, but this particular one was really significant because it was all adorned inside in various ways with different arches and this different, stairs. And on the dome, if you can see on the top left, there are so many different Islamic designs, the arabesques and geometrical designs, and the windows created in a variety of ways. So the use of the nilometer is basically, it measures the level of the river Nile. That's why we call it the nilometer. If the river is going to flood, the nilometer measures a particular level, and then people can take action. And if there is too little water, they can understand, they can follow these patterns. That was really important. At one point, apparently in history, only the priests at that time were privy of the nilometer, and they could basically tell the other people that they had inside knowledge from God whether the Nile is going to spill or not. But the fact is that they were looking at a nilometer. Here is another example of very practical use of Islamic art. One is the compass, the other is the astrolabe. Of course, we all know what the compass was used for. The astrolabe was used for non-religious purposes. It was used to, see the different stars and basically to orient yourself by the night star. And for religious purposes, it's used to show you the direction of Mecca, because one of the I guess pillars of Islam is to do the 5 prayers of the day during the day, and you have to turn your face towards Mecca. So if the empire was so big, it basically incorporated all the areas between China and Spain. How would people know where Mecca is? They needed a kind of a device. And so this astrolabe would give them the particular way to go and face that direction. And you see all the different ornaments, you see how beautifully they were made. And they were made of different materials. In this particular case, they were made of metal. When Islam started in the 7th century, we suddenly have a totally new type of building, which is called the mosque. And the prototype of the mosque was basically the house of the Prophet Muhammad in Medina. This is a model of this house. It's not the real house. It's just how people imagine that it would look. And the geometrical simplicity, where you have the house, the small house, and then around it, you have a courtyard where Muhammad would go out and kind of speak to his congregation and give the next revelation that was revealed to him. At some point, there were so many people who wanted to hear him that he had to be hoisted up so that people around him could hear him. And that became another part of the simple geometrical designs of all mosques. Typically, mosques are either square or they are rectangular. And one of the walls of these mosques is always facing Mecca. So they know that this is the direction of the Mecca. And on that mosque, you find a couple of things. One is kind of an alcove, which is very ornamented, which kind of symbolizes the place of the Prophet. And next to it, usually you see a kind of a podium, which again symbolizes from where Muhammad was giving his speeches to the community and from where typically imams speak. And here you could see a closer image of that particular geometric design. And here it is. That is the alcove that we have in each Islamic mosque. Sometimes these alcoves are portable, like this one. It's made of wood and it's portable. You could carry it from one mosque and basically take it to another mosque. When we compare the Orthodox churches, for example, or any other churches, but mostly Orthodox churches to Islamic mosques, we see kind of like the differences. The Orthodox churches are filled inside with so many paintings of the paradise, of different saints, of scenes of torture in hell, etc. They're very colorful, and all of them are based in images. There is hardly any letters or writing at all. By contrast, Islamic mosques and in general Islamic art has three different types of decorations. One of the type is having epigraphs, basically writing. Typically, that comes from Islamic, from the Quran or other Islamic writing, phrases from the Quran. Another type of decoration is the vegetal decoration, or these are the arabesques that are different intricate kind of symmetrical designs that are put together, maybe in the shape of flowers or different other kind of leaves or whatnot. And then the third one is the geometrical design, when you have a star with different around the star, we have like different polygons and it goes in different directions all around the star, and you could make many different forms out of that. And here you see the inside of the mosque has these kind of geometrical forms and shapes, and it has also the arabesques, and it has some of the writing. On the outside also, you see how symmetrical everything is, and you see the courtyard, which is typically based on this earlier first mosque, the house of the Prophet Muhammad. And some of the Islamic art was used for private use, and some of it was used for public use. Here we have three different examples of that. One of the examples on the left is the door that is made in wood and has these metal different arabesques and different engravings. A lot of these examples, as you see, come from Egypt. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And at that time, centuries ago, there wasn't that much wood in Egypt, and so that was really a kind of an expensive material to use. In the middle, you see reception rooms from the 18th century. Basically, this is one of the rooms in a big house, in a private house. And then on the right, you see this fireplace, also beautifully decorated with these geometrical and arabesque designs, and with the arches, and with tiling, which is one of the symbol iconic types of Islamic art. And here you see private objects as well. This is a golden necklace. And on the golden necklace, you actually see written there, glory forever. And you can see these different intricate designs that are repeating again and again. And the ring, you see an S shape being repeated over and over again. Here we see different types of fabric, tapestry. That was very popular. On the right, the red tapestry comes from Egypt, and it was called, even after that, it was called Coptic tapestry, because in the beginning, a lot of Coptic people, which are Christians of Egypt, they used to do that professionally. With the centuries, a lot of Muslims started doing the tapestry as well, but somehow that name stuck, and you could recognize it much later than these first earlier centuries. In the middle, you could see many different designs, and obviously the artist who did that wanted to show this variety of different forms and shapes that they could do. And the label, the actual writing on the top of it says patience is the greatest blessing. And then the last one on the left, it has multiple designs. It has these kind of medallions with different animals inside, and on top of that there is writing, and in between the writing you can also see geometrical designs. They are kind of small here, but they are different geometrical designs with different colors. And here we see a book binding. Usually these were done for Qurans, but sometimes they were done for other books, such as, science books or some kind of stories. With science, well, the Qurans in the beginning started with only writing, but with the centuries, there developed a whole tradition of having a lot of decorations around the writing of the Qurans. And when scientific books started being written in the 19th, 8th, and 9th century, mostly in Baghdad, they started putting illustrations to illustrate what these scientific books were talking about. And when you had books of stories, such as, Arabian Nights or any other books of stories, they had so many figures that were illustrating the story that the books talked about, with multiple colors done by very skillful artists. On the right top, you see a pen box with writing and with different decorations that come from different flowers: peonies, chrysanthemums, lotuses, and there is even phoenixes in the medallion there. And the pen box was something that was carried by the royal secretary. And in the bottom, you see again something that was used by the Mamluk caliphs in Egypt. And the Mamluks were slaves that at first were hired to protect the caliphs, but then they became caliphs themselves. And here, this is the key to the Kaaba, which is the black stone in Mecca, around which all Muslims go to pilgrimage and then circle multiple times. So this is kind of a symbolic key to the Kaaba, and it has different writings, usually religious writings, and it basically gave a lot of pride to the people who were responsible symbolically for carrying that key. This is the end of my presentation, my examples. I would be happy to answer any questions. Please write them in the chat box. And after all the other guest speakers, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Dr. Mohammad Ghomi now.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak on this. Yes, I enjoyed the first talk. Actually, a number of themes that was mentioned there, I will reiterate. So, symmetries of tilings, that's the title of my talk. And so this is a brief introduction to the mathematical theory of planar tilings. Specifically, we discuss classification of periodic tilings based on their symmetry groups. Some tiles and the notion of symmetry was already mentioned. The most complex symmetry patterns from the mathematical point of view can be found in southern Spain, in Andalusia, in Persia or modern-day Iran, and Morocco, as well as other parts in the ancient Islamic empire, but these are the three main areas that I'll focus on during my talk. So a tiling, and a more technical mathematical term for that is a tessellation, is a covering of the plane by a number of non-overlapping shapes that we call tiles, and there are numerous examples. We have examples coming to us from the Roman Empire. So Romans were masterful mosaic makers. However, focus on this border. It shows a tiling pattern composed of squares and diamonds. This is another example from the Roman era. This pleasing arrangement of diamonds, which gives this three-dimensional cubical impression. After the Roman period, we have in medieval Europe, this is one of the most impressive examples, maybe the most impressive in medieval time. It's the floor of the Westminster Abbey in the high altar location, right where the coronation takes place in the middle. And so this was made by Italian artisans in the 13th century. However, the talk is about periodic tilings. So we see examples of various kinds of periodic tilings in this different bits of it. So for instance, this is enlargement of some bit, and I will talk about this later. It's a uniform tiling of the plane by hexagons, squares, and triangles. This is another detail from the so-called Cosmati pavement in Westminster. Okay, so in the Christian world, obviously, there was no ban on human depiction, and we've already heard Dr. Khazaal dispelling the myth that human depiction was completely forbidden in the Islamic world. Of course, we have a century's worth of Persian miniatures. Nonetheless, in the mosques themselves, we don't have human depiction. So, you know, if you have a ceiling, say the Sistine Chapel, and if Michelangelo is around, you can say, do your thing, and this is what you get. But if the human depiction is forbidden in the mosque, then what you need to do is to develop geometrical patterns and ever more elaborate symmetry shapes. So this is a famous example of Persian tiling from city of Kashan in Iran. And actually in the previous talk, we already saw pictures of this. So the way this is generated, you start with a square grid, and some of the squares you turn into these octagonal stars, and the other squares complement those in this X-shaped pattern. So the way these tiles are made, you can start with a square, rotate that square by 45 degrees, and it gives you this special 8-pointed star. So this 8-pointed star is a major theme in Islamic tiles and decorative patterns, stretching from Persia to Spain. Right, so, you know, again, if you cannot depict creation of Adam on the ceiling of your mosque, you could do a tiling like this. It's from the mosque in city of Shiraz in Iran, Nasr al-Mulk Mosque. This is from the dome of the famous Persian poet Hafiz in city of Shiraz. This is a 12-pointed rosette star. Sometimes it's called the Gere pattern. Gere in Persian means knot. It's referring to the patterns of these petals in the rosette going over and under each other. So this rosette pattern is constructed it's a kind of a more advanced version of the previous construction. So we have this 8-pointed star. If you take the 8-pointed star and rotate it by half of 45 degrees, if you rotate it by 45 degrees, you don't get anything, but rotate by 22.5 degrees, and then you get something with 16 points, and then your rosette is generated from middle of this pattern. This is an example from the Morocco. See here, we do have the 8-pointed star, the octagonal star here, it occurs there in this tiling pattern. And this is another beautiful example from Morocco. And so here we have the tiles here. They're on a hexagonal grid. And here we see this 16-pointed rosette star, again, in this Gere pattern. It's in Persian, it's called Gere anyways, demonstrated here. In the Alhambra castle in Spain, that's where we have the most famous examples of various symmetry patterns and these spectacular tilings. So we see that this the 16-pointed rosette appears here. And this is actually the same pattern we saw earlier, if you may remember, in Hafez's tomb. It occurs here at the other end of the Persian world. These are some other examples of tilings in Alhambra. You see they have much richer symmetry patterns than those found in the Greco-Roman world and in medieval Europe, as I'll explain later. Another example from Alhambra. It's difficult to believe sometimes that they come from 13th century because some of them look quite contemporary, like this one. Actually, my favorite is this one. This one looks like it's from the Art Deco period, not 13th century. And keep this one in mind because we're going to see it again shortly. This is some examples from Seville. So various locations in Spain, in Andalusia region, you have these spectacular tiles that people can go and visit today. So this is the Alhambra Palace. There are 17 possible symmetry patterns that a periodic tile can have. In the traditional Western art and architecture, only a handful of these patterns were explored. But in Alhambra alone, at least 13 of these patterns are already present under one roof. And by some counts, all can be found there. There is a bit of a disagreement among the experts. Are they all here or not? I didn't want to get into the middle of that, but certainly at least 13. Some people say 15. If you look at other places in Spain, you can find the rest of them. So a tile is any shape which can cover the plane without overlaps or gaps. There are only 3 regular convex polygons which tile the plane, and the proof of that is very simple. It follows from the fact that the total angle that you can have around the vertex in tiling has to be 360 degrees. These are regular tiles. So the angle has to divide 360. So what are the possibilities? The possibilities are 60, which is the angle in an equilateral triangle. So you get 6 of them. 6 times 60 is 360. We have 90. 4 times 90 is 360. And in a hexagon, the angle is 120. 3 times 20, 3 times 120 is 360. If you have a 7-sided figure, then the angle is already too big because you need at least 3 tiles around each vertex. And if you have also the pentagon, the angle in the pentagon is not going to divide 360. Now, if you allow so-called multiple convex polygons, then you get exactly 12 ways to tile the plane. This one here corresponds to the picture I showed earlier from Westminster Abbey, from the Cosmati pavement. So these are uniform. Uniform means that if you look at around each vertex, all vertices are similar. So this vertex, as it says here, is composed of 4 triangles and 1 hexagon. Okay, but there are actually an unlimited number of other shapes which can tile the plane, and they're not difficult to generate. You can start with a square. You can deform the right-hand side here and copy that deformation on the left-hand side. And then you deform the top however way you want and carry it down here to the bottom. And if you're talented enough, then you can produce these famous examples by Escher. This is another famous example by Escher. This tessellation of the plane. Some of the tiles are in the form of angels, some are in the form of bats. Does it look familiar to you? Maybe you saw it some moments earlier. Here's a hint. It bears a strong resemblance to this tiling in Alhambra, and this is not an accident. Escher himself, he went in Alhambra when he was a student, and he says here, it says, it made a profound impression on me. These are hand drawings made by Escher himself when he was a student. You see, he has a picture of the rosette here, and then the other tilings that he has copied. So he's probably the most famous artist on college campus. If you go to the dormitory sooner or later, you see some of his posters, but not too many people know that a major source of inspiration for him were the tilings in Alhambra. Okay, so in this talk, we're interested in the periodic tilings. So it means that some pattern repeats itself. Now, not all tilings are periodic. These are famous non-periodic tilings found by Roger Penrose only in 1970s. They're composed of 2 diamonds, and these diamonds are not random. They have very precise angles, and they'll tile the plane, but no particular pattern ever repeats itself. And this was a major shock when Roger Penrose discovered this, especially because they kind of exhibit some 5-fold symmetry, but these symmetries are local. There is no bigger, wider pattern. Now, to add to the shock, in the year 2023, as we speak, a major mathematical discovery was made that you can tile the plane without any periodicity using a single tile. This was found by David Smith and was already reported in some publications. Okay, but we are interested in the periodic tiling. So periodic means that it's invariant under a group of isometric transformations of the plane. Isometric transformation is one which preserves distances between every pair of points. And it comes in 3 flavors. We have translations, rotations, and reflections. So this is a reflection. If you stand barefoot on a sand, impression of one foot is the reflection of the other. Translation, if you hop on one leg forward, for instance. Rotation, if you stand on one leg and jump up and rotate 160 degrees, land on the other side. And we have reflection. So, so-called glide reflection. So glide reflection is a combination of a reflection and a translation. You get the glide reflection as you just walk along the beach. Glide reflection is the operation which is used in producing many of the frieze patterns in Greco-Roman architecture, such as these borders that we see in Parthenon. They're generated by the glide reflection. So symmetry, the word symmetry was mentioned in the previous talk, and some objects are more symmetric than the other. In mathematics, symmetry has a very precise meaning. Symmetry is invariance under a group of transformations. The symmetry here in tiling refers to the isometries of the plane. So we have translational symmetry, rotational symmetry. Stars have rotational symmetry. If you have a pair of leaves in many plants, they have this reflectional symmetry. And many formations, usually a typical formation along a stem of a plant has this glide reflection symmetry. Okay, so a group of, a collection of transformations forms a group, provided whenever you compose 2 of them, then the composition is in that collection. These group of isometries are called crystallographic or wallpaper groups in 2 dimensions. So these are a group of transformations such that if you apply to a fundamental region or a tile, we get a covering of the whole plane. A fundamental tile can always be taken to be a triangle or a parallelogram. So the incredible thing is that any periodic tiling, no matter how complicated, can always be generated by a triangle or a parallelogram. And there are only 17 possible ways of doing that. So for instance, in this rosette, in the gira pattern that I showed, you see it looks quite complex, but it's made by just repeating a parallelogram. In this case, in fact, a square. Can you see it? Here it is. So you take the square and you reflect it to the right. So it's not just translation. You actually have to reflect. And then you reflect it up, and then you reflect it again to the left, and then you obtain this square portion. And this square portion is now fully symmetric. So you can continue reflecting it, or you can just translate it right and left, up and down, and they generate this whole famous pattern that, as I said, it's common throughout the Islamic world. Okay, so there are only 5 wallpaper groups if one disallows reflection. So it means that the tile is painted only on one side. So you have only one tile to work with. You don't have like 2 different tiles that are mirror images of each other. You get 5 groups. This is the most simple one that most people have in their bathroom. This is slightly more complicated. This is not a reflection. This is just a rotation. So this tile is obtained from this tile by a rotation. And these are other arrangements that you have. Remember, the fundamental region is always either a parallelogram or a triangle. If you allow for reflection, then we get 12 more, adding to 17 in total. And the symmetry of the rosette, it's here. Remember, we started from one tile, we reflected left, we reflected up, we reflected to the other direction again, and then you can translate as needed. So these are examples from all 17 wallpaper groups. Okay, so I'm going to end my talk by going back to Alhambra and show you the fundamental regions for each of these symmetry groups. So, the wonderful thing about the theory of tiling and group symmetries, as I said, is that all of these, no matter how complicated, can be constructed by taking a parallelogram. And this parallelogram, you translate it, you reflect it, and you rotate it, and then you cover the entire plane. This is another example from Alhambra. The fundamental region here is just this triangle. This triangle generates this entire pattern. This is also from Alhambra. It can be found in Alhambra, although this is the common herringbone pattern. You can see it on many sidewalks. But even this one cannot defy the mathematical theory. The mathematical theory says that you can always start with a parallelogram. In this case, it's actually a square. If you start from this square and then you reflect and translate it, you generate this common pattern. And finally, this is our favorite example, which Escher used in his angel and devil tile. This is the fundamental region, or fundamental tile for this, which generates the whole pattern. Thank you for your attention. I'm also glad to answer questions if there's any time.
Thank you so much. And we'll hear from our final presenter, Professor Ahmed.
All right. So basically, I'll be briefly talking about Arabic calligraphy, and as both speakers mentioned, how important calligraphy in terms of being a big part of the Islamic culture. I will provide general introduction to how many types and the different types of Arabic calligraphy, showing examples and how they're used in the culture. So the main different types of scripts are these 6 types. Each one could have another type that follows the same one, but a different variation of that script. So we have Naskh, which is mainly used in writing the Quran, and books. Generally, formal books and textbooks will be written in this type. I'll show examples of each one of them. And then Riqa, which started by the Ottomans in 850. That one mainly for letters. It's faster to do handwriting and send letters, basically. Farsi, which was the Persian writing style. that was adopted in Arabic calligraphy. Diwani was also used for official government writing by the Ottomans, and it's coming from Diwan, which is like a department in the government. Then we have Thuluth. That one is the one that you mainly find in decorations in mosques, in palaces like Alhambra, as Dr. Ghomi mentioned, and different mosques around Muslim countries. Kufi came from Kufa in Iraq, and that's where it got its name from. And that one is mainly also in decoration, and it's not very easy to master, and it needs a lot of work and practice because it relies on measuring and making sure everything fits a specific measurement. So examples. So that's Naskh, the first one. Every letter is clear, used in textbooks. You don't need to work very hard to figure out which letter is first and second. It's clear and in order. That's why it's used in books. That's the second example, Riqa. And then that's the Farsi script or style. Then we have Diwani. So here it gets, the letters can get linked to each other. Some of them, like this one here, some of these letters, they be called dancing letters because you can literally play with them and take them, stretch them, take them up, down. So it's like as if the letters are dancing. So they're called dancing letters. Then we have my favorite one, which is the thuluth. You could be as creative as you want with this one. You could have first, these are actually verses from the Quran, or like the beginning of surahs or chapters in the Quran. It look like plant, fruit, and many other examples. This is a picture from the calligraphy that is on the Kaaba in Mecca, where they're sewing the letters with these golden threads so that it would be displayed at the end of the year on the Kaaba itself. And people take it to shapes. This is a very famous line from a poem by a very famous poet, Al-Mutanabbi. And he talks about horses in this poem. And somebody took that line and made it look like a horse with calligraphy. And it's all letters and words. This one, Dr. Ahmed's presentation, you mentioned the reflection. This middle one is called mirroring, or reflection in calligraphy, where you write one side, the same word, you write it on the right side, and it's reflected on the left side. Exactly the same, but reflected on the other side. So we see this is the same letter here. It continues be connected with the same letter as if it's reflected in the mirror. So that's another style coming all from Thuluth. It's still one type of script, and it has different variations. The way that works is the one writing the calligraphy, you have a lot of room for being creative, but also it follows certain rules. So it uses this proportional system where it uses diamond-shaped dots to measure how long the letter should be, how long or how wide it should be. So I can't, for example, decide that I'm going to make it that long or that short. It follows certain proportion. And with this, usually use bamboo pens made out of bamboo with a sharp tip at the end to help you measure the dots and to know, am I following this? So the bamboo pens could be small, large, the size you're using, this will be your measurement. So if you're using a large pen, for example, then the same measurement, you draw a diamond-shaped dot, and that's your standard that you follow when you're writing the letters. And that's example of like each letter, how they look and how many dots should be between the beginning of the letter and the end of it, and between each, like the top and the bottom and so on. That's for Thuluth. Kufi that I mentioned at the end, that one is mainly for mosques and palaces. And you see here like floor kind of variation on the top to add to the decoration. To write this, you need a ruler, so it has to be straight, certain letters here. And we see other examples. Are different variations of Kufi. It's the same script, but still different variations. So that one fluoriated Kufi or Kufic, and that's knotted Kufic, and then another one, the new style. So different variations within the same style, but still follow the same standard. Finally, there's a different script coming from Thuluth, the one that I mentioned here. So that's also another type. This is only preserved for seal, like if a sultan or a king wanted to seal a letter to say, this is my signature, so this would be used. And it's only saved for signatures by officials and like sultans and kings. Then it's an extra one that it's not very common right now. It's called the Moroccan script. Mainly was used in Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and also Spain. And it's mainly used in these countries, and it was used for Quran and other formal writings. So that's basically in general different types of calligraphy. If you don't have access to bamboo, for example, and you want to practice that, you could buy calligraphy pens. There's usually like 2 mm or 3 mm, as long as the edge would be like sharp tip that way, not like a brush. That's very helpful for writing. So yeah, thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you all so much. This has just been so fascinating. Truly fascinating and interesting. I have to say that we've gone a little over time. We do have a question, but I'm not sure which slide it's referring to. It says, what is the artist's message with this? But it doesn't specify whether they're talking about the tiles, the calligraphy. So if that person is still on, if you could clarify for us. And then another question is, are there any historic writings about the geometry of the decorations?
I guess that question is for me. I don't know. I don't know. Geometry of the decorations, is that question for me? I'm the geometer. Anyways, maybe I can take a shot and then mathematical theory of symmetry and group theory is not that old. I mean, it dates back only to 19th century. So maybe, I mean, aesthetically, of course, they were pleasing and people appreciated them. And Alhambra, of course, has been around for 700 years. But analyzing and quantifying these symmetry patterns is something that belongs to modern mathematics. Now, whether there is some, if it's only 100 years old, I guess that doesn't really count as historic. Whether there has been some historic writing analyzing these. So from the mathematical point of view, as I said, that's not really impossible. That's not really possible because the mathematics of it is, is not that old. The subject of group theory is not that old, but maybe other speakers know something more about this.
And that first question got clarified. They want to know, was there an artistic message associated with the tiling? I hope I've got that correct.
Is that a question for Dr. Ghomi?
Yeah, if there's any evidence of like associating certain concepts, like with the arabesque, if there's certain flowers or things that are represented that have a specific meaning, or certain patterns that are associated with concept, a specific concept.
I'm not aware. As I said, these are kind of very fundamental geometric shapes. You have triangles, you have squares, you got hexagons, and then you can rotate and translate these. And these are very much the definition of abstraction. We call them rosette, obviously, because these fundamental shapes occur throughout nature. But to look at a particular design and try to kind of interpret that as to what was meant for it to represent, I think that's not very easy. I mean, obviously we call them rosette for a reason, but I'm not sure we can get more specific than that.
Gotcha. And Professor Ahmed, I'm curious about how readable the different scripts are, because I think about like graffiti, it's Roman letters, but at a certain point they become unreadable, so how readable are the examples that you showed us, especially the ones that, like the horse and things like that? Is it easy to read, or?
So for the first three scripts that I mentioned, they're pretty easy. But for the last two, it requires some practice or familiarity with the text, or if you have some background, once you start figuring out where the text starts, is it going top to bottom or bottom to top? Once you figure out where it starts and you're familiar with the text, you will know it. And there is a pattern. So if it's going from top to bottom, it's not going to change in between. And then you expect like the shapes of the letters, so this is where the word ends. So you start looking for the next word. But if you're not familiar with the text, it will be difficult to figure out what the text is saying.
And I can just add, in terms of the symbolism of the arabesques and the symbolism of just in general these Islamic geometrical patterns. So people may create a lot of things, and then post factum they kind of come up with an explanation. And I believe this is the case here. And the explanation is that they sometimes it's said that they represent the unity of God. Or in other times they say that they represent the infinity of God. I think this is a post factum explanation after these patterns have been created, and they basically are used to adorn, to decorate, to show mainly human presence and the ability of the humans to manipulate their environment in ways that are pleasing, in ways that inspire certain feelings in them, such as feelings of awe, feelings of, maybe they work together on that particular pattern, or they associate it as a symbol of the particular ruler or the particular community. But then, as I said, there is this more abstract idea, which in my opinion is post factum. It symbolizes something related to God.
If I can interject quickly with regard to the readability, I can attest that I could read most of the things that were shown, but I think maybe because I'm a geometer, so I have my eyes trained to pick up patterns, but most of them were readable to me.
Okay. Someone asked, has a modern form of any of the Arabic calligraphies emerged?
Not very aware of something that would be modern and would be added as a specific separate script on its own, because as I mentioned, for example, the Thulus script, within that one there are different variations, and the Kufi, it started in Kufa and still has the same name, But when there is a new modern style, then it's still under this variation. But I don't know if there's like a specific institute that would say, yes, now we adopted a new script, let's add it, because it doesn't exactly work that way.
I think maybe we can add here that certainly the modern digital typeface for Arabic is a lot more, I guess, numerous and has so many variations that maybe as a whole genre, you know, computer typeface or digital typeface, maybe we can consider it as, you know, this is the modern contribution to the Arabic calligraphy.
I like that interpretation. I would love to pick your brains for hours, but as I mentioned, we are a little over time, so I'm going to have to call it evening. But I think if our viewers or anything like me, you just like sparked, you just planted the seed. Now I want to go like down the rabbit hole. I'm definitely going to check the link that you provided. And oh man, all the examples in Dr. Ghomi pulled the Escher out, like getting to see his sketches of actually having observed, you know, so often inspiration is not always acknowledged. You know, when an artist gets to a certain level, we don't hear, oh, they encountered this specific thing. And as you look at their later works, you can really see that influence. Just a lovely set of talks, and thank you all so much. I'm gonna just close out with sharing my screen to highlight a couple of upcoming events. Obviously, if you enjoyed this talk and would like to support the museum being able to offer other free programming, we always welcome donations. And just a reminder that Geometric Aljamia is on exhibit through December 6th. I really hope if you're in town that you're able to come through and see some of the works. If you'd like to connect with our programming, we're on all of the social media outlets, and the recording of the talk tonight will be posted on our website as well as the Paper Museum's YouTube. So paper.gatech.edu. And in the chat, we dropped the links to all of our presenters' web pages, Georgia Tech web pages. If you have additional questions, or I know Dr. Ghomi has some slides from previous lectures that you can also access on his site. Once again, thank you all. And we've got 2 more workshops associated with this workshop. So if you're in the Atlanta area, we'll be doing Quilled Mosaic on Thursday, November 16th, 6:30 to 9. And then on December 6th, our closing date for the exhibition, you can come take a workshop and also see the show on its final day of exhibit. We'll be doing our paper cutting workshop. Thank you all for attending our program, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.